Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Carolinas Weather Group. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. The first Wednesday of December. Hard to believe that we are approaching the final month of the year. So it started off on a warm note down in the South Carolina area, whereas here in North Carolina it was cold and rainy, just like the past 10, 12 weeks have been. So it's been an active day here in the at least the western part of the Carolinas. We've had our own little bit of flooding, nothing like what our guest tonight experienced earlier this fall. But meanwhile, down in South Carolina, it's fairly nice until the front moved through, and they're finally getting some rain down there. So tonight we'll kind of skip introductions because our topic is kind of still fresh in everyone's mind. We're talking about the flood of I guess the first part of October, the South Carolina flood, historical flood that is still, most of the area is still feeling the effects of it a few months later. So tonight we have with us Rob Fowler, who is the chief meteorologist for WCBD in Charleston, South Carolina. Henry Rothernburg from WACH in Columbia, South Carolina, chief meteorologist, as well as Jamie Arnold, who is the chief meteorologist at WMBF in Myrtle Beach, as well as Shea Gibson, who is meteorologist with WeatherFlow. These guys were all on the front line, per se. They were battling this event, and we look forward to hearing their stories and kind of talking about the historical event, which I believe, unless something crazy happens, will probably be the most talked about weather stories of 2015. So, guys, I'll let you, first of all, introduce yourself, kind of tell us a little bit about you for our first-time viewers who are watching tonight. I know we've had Rob and Jamie on several times, and Shea, this is Henry's first time, so looking forward to having Henry on. So I'll start with Rob, maybe kind of introduce yourself to everyone, and then we'll go into the topic tonight.
All right, thanks a lot, Scotty. I'm the chief here and have been here about 28 years. Got here in 1987, 2 years in, was Hurricane Hugo, so I had that experience, and I've been on the program to talk about that. I think they're in the 25th anniversary. Yeah, it's Charleston, great place to be. What happened early October was something obviously we'd never seen before, historic. So like I tell the school kids when I go talk to groups, you know, a lot of people are going to read about in books what you guys just experienced in person. So I know we'll get into more in-depth about this, but it was quite the storm, something I've never seen in my career of more than 33 years.
Yes, it was a very historic event. Let's stay in Charleston. I'll let Shea introduce himself there with WeatherFlow.
All right. Yeah, started with the Chucktown wind report, started doing some wind forecasting for the local water sports, for kiteboarding and windsurfing, anything on the water, anything maritime related, and then got scouted by WeatherFlow and picked up by them to help start out with the southeast wind forecasting, and that stretches from Jekyll Island, Georgia to Cedar Island, North Carolina, and just sort of took off with that and started diving in a little bit more with, got more involved with the community and with Rob Fowler and some others here locally in Charleston. So it's really been a great experience to get to know a lot of the weather community here in Charleston. So looking forward to it.
Shea, thank you for coming on tonight. Let's go a little bit north up on the coast to the Grand Strand and talk a little bit to Jamie Arnold. Jamie?
Yeah, I've been here at WBF since our launch in 2008, chief meteorologist here. Before Myrtle Beach, I spent 8 years at WITN in Greenville, North Carolina. I was up there through the early 2000s as a string of hurricanes and tropical storms went through there, and actually got my start as weather producer at WCNC back in 2001. So I'm a Carolina born and bred, and looks like I'm going to be sticking around the Carolinas for a while.
That's good. We like you here, so we want you to stay here.
Planning on it.
All right, let's go over to Columbia, but Henry's not in Columbia tonight. He's actually on vacation. So, Henry, first time on the show, introduce us to yourself and maybe how you got into weather.
Yeah, Henry Rothernburg, and I'm the chief at WACH in Columbia, South Carolina. And although, like you said, I'm not in Columbia, I'm in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee right now, visiting family for the week. Was 6 years old, terrified of weather. Cousin took me outside there in a thunderstorm. We did the stupidest thing ever. We stood in the corner of a garage under a tree during a lightning storm, and he explained to me what was making all that noise. In hindsight, I should have been struck by lightning, but wasn't, and just beer became fascination, and now we get to do what we love, or what I love, every day, and ended up in Columbia in June of 2010, and before that was actually here in Memphis and worked in St. Louis and Columbia, Missouri as well when I was at the University of Missouri. So that's me.
Awesome. I can tell you and Joey would get along very well. That sounds like a Joey Mosteller story. All right, guys. Well, let's dive into the topic tonight, the Great Flood of 2015, or however you want to talk about it, an upper level low, the effects of Hurricane Joaquin, which really directly didn't affect us. But let's kind of talk about it. We actually did a show on a Wednesday night before everything took place, and at the time we thought the North Carolina area was going to be the hardest hit with flooding. But as the models progressed through the mid and late week days, that kind of transitioned to South Carolina. So talk to us a little bit about how the setup for you guys for the heavy rain, especially along the coast, and then in towards Columbia. So I'll start with Rob. Rob, I guess you were probably the closest to Joaquin as it was skirting off the coast. But talk to us about the setup for you guys, and maybe how you guys prepared for it as this system was approaching.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Scotty. Obviously, you look at the forecast maps and you do your analysis, but I don't think the end result anybody could have known what was going to happen at the end of the day, so to speak. But yeah, we knew we had the upper low, we had a stationary front, we had a blocking high to the north, and we had Joaquin in the Bahamas. And I think our biggest concern was trying to dispel the rumors that what was moving on shore, even at the beginning, was Joaquin, because a lot of our viewers are thinking the hurricane was making landfall, and that wasn't the case. That if you take Joaquin out of the equation completely, you still have rain. You have historic record rainfall, most likely not, but we still were going to get a wet scenario. And actually for us, it started in late September. The 30th of September, we had about a half an inch of rain. So this event was really kind of started in September, continued the first 5 days of October. And, you know, as you well know, I know we got the numbers, but we set records for 1 day rainfall, 2 day rainfall, 3 day rainfall, 4 day rainfall. It was our wettest October ever. It's the second wettest month ever in the history of Charleston, only following June of 1973 with over 27 inches. So, and we had almost 19 inches. But yes, I think going in, we knew it was going to be a wet scenario, but obviously when Joaquin added that little, almost like throwing more gasoline on the fire, then it was Katie bar the door, and we just didn't know where it was going to end. And I obviously we got it all on the coast, but we had to kind of focus our attention also inland towards Henry, because as we well know, Columbia really got it pretty bad. We had a lot of flooding here. We had some neighborhoods which had already been flooded earlier this fall from some other rain events. So what we found out is not only is downtown susceptible to flooding, we've got some other areas that are very susceptible as well and have flooded several times. So it was an eye-opener for a lot of us.
Well, Jamie, let's take it up the coast to you guys there in the Grand Strand. As we're watching this develop over the week, what are you doing there at WMBF, and what are you guys preparing for?
I think, you know, it was Monday. Me and Robert Whitehurst, Andy Stein, all of our rest of our team were sort of started looking at the models, and I think it was Monday when, you know, we all sort of really realized, okay, something maybe pretty significant is about to happen. I think that's when the European started showing its sort of ridiculous 20-plus inch totals, and we, you know, talked about it internally, didn't really mention it much to the higher ups. I did send an email to our news director saying, you know, this is something we're going to watch for the weekend. Certainly by Wednesday, you know, we were still seeing it was run after run after run. It was obviously moving that axis of where that heavy rain was. You know, sometimes we were north of that axis, sometimes we were south, sometimes we were right in the middle of it. Definitely Wednesday we started putting a plan into place. That was when Joaquin still was maybe sort of a direct player. By Thursday, we knew Joaquin was over with, and so it was just all on flood preps, getting our team ready, sort of coming up with an initial plan of where we were going to move our staff. The whole time, I think one of the big things that stands out with me was struggling with the numbers to put on the air. Every model run was showing, you know, these 15, 20, 25-inch totals. I've never put anything like that out in the air. That's like making a snow forecast around here. You know, you just don't put numbers that absurd on the air. You just can't. Eventually we did. but that's sort of the biggest thing that sticks out for me. And I think trying to get across, sort of we as meteorologists, I think understand, all right, yeah, there's going to be a flood. We're going to have a flooding scenario, but sort of the latest theme in TV is, impact forecasting. All right, 10 inches of rain. What does that mean? What does 15 inches mean? What does 25 inches mean? I don't know what 25 inches mean. I do now because I saw it happen. But sort of relaying that information to the viewers was definitely, I think, one of the sort of struggles, especially leading into it that weekend, that Friday, that Saturday, after we had the first wave Friday night, North Myrtle Beach, Friday night, the first wave picked up 15 inches just from that event. That was on before the main sort of fire hose came through again on Sunday with another 15 to 20. So it was, it was tough, no doubt about it.
And Henry, let's go to you, as you guys are more centrally in the state, not really on the coast. How are you guys preparing for this? Because you would expect higher amounts along the coast, but then moving that far inland. I mean, what was your guys' preparations, and what was the setup looking like for you guys as you planned for the week?
I'll tell you, it's one of those things that, and like Jamie said, you're looking at some of these totals and the models, and we all said, oh, the models are, what are they smoking right now or whatever. Like, this is not possible. And as we kept going further and further into the week, it's like, okay, we're going to get a lot of rain. But I think something that, as far as prepping us go, it wasn't figuring out how can we get the message that we're going to get flooding, but how can we get the message that people may listen to it. And honestly, it was worse than even I expected, but it wasn't so much the flooding as it was the dam failures for us. So no matter how much we prepared for rain totals, and I want to say the highest that I put out there was about 20 inches, I finally caved and started doing breakdown maps, and we got about 2 inches higher than that in some spots. But people saying, oh, flood of biblical proportions and things like that, to me that just kind of downplayed it to some people, and it got them to not take it as serious. So it was, how can we get this message across? We're going to get wet this weekend. We're going to have a lot of rain this weekend. We're going to get flooding this weekend, not in the typical areas. So it was just trying to be straightforward and say, here's what's going to happen, here's the time frame we think it's going to happen. But the reality is, I don't know if there was really any way to truly prepare for this, because for us, it was the dam failures that really just hurt Columbia. I mean, you had, I want to say, 36 dam failures in the state. We had 9 of them surrounding Columbia. There were dams that I didn't even know existed that were failing, not just breaching, but failing. And so trying to be as straightforward as possible, but I would honestly say still trying to learn how can we better prepare in the future, because we're not structural engineers, but that's something that we got to take into account if we were to ever see anything like this again.
And Shea, I want to turn it to you, because you per se are not going out to the local people as our fellow Mets on TV are, but how are you preparing your followers and the people that you're associated with weather flow? I mean, you're right there in the middle of it as well.
It's either 20 or 30.
I think you've got your mic muted there.
It's okay, we good now?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, all right, good. I think I got muted at some point there. So yeah, we're looking at medium range models from days out ahead of time. We're looking at GFS and the Euro models, and we're watching Joaquin, we're watching Ida, we're watching Invest 99 coming across from Bay of Campeche up the western side of Florida into the Gulf of Mexico. And so we have a lot of things going on there, so we're watching very closely the tropical situation, since we have storm track and some of the other guidance models and some of the forecast tracks for these things. And so you start to see an upper level low coming across from Texas, and then you see Invest 99 coming up into the Gulf of Mexico, and then you see Joaquin stalling to the south, and Ida's creeping in from the west. You have two anticyclones, one to the north capping from Canada, and then another one in the Atlantic, and you see all this suppressed low pressure to the south. So that was an immediate trigger for us to start entering into some tropical discussion as far as the the locals and for the water communities, I pretty much told them, look, it's getting ready to get really nasty. It's going to be a washout. There's going to be a lot of thunderstorming. The water's still warm. The winds are going to be really high. The tides are going to be really high. So there's going to be, I think our high tide anomaly ended up being about almost 2 feet or 2.5 feet over what it should have been with a perigee full moon. We had what would normally have been about a 6 or 6.2 foot high tide went to about 8.5, and Rob might have some of those exact stats, but the extratropical storm model output records that information, and it was pretty impressive. So you had quite a few things coming together before that upper low even negatively tilted from the windward side of the Appalachians, the southern Appalachian Mountains. So that was a first trigger that we had something major coming together over the southeast coast, and of course watching Joaquin very closely because models were very jumpy, but I think the Euro really did a pretty good job of that.
As we're speaking of Joaquin and you're talking a little bit about the models, that's one of my next questions. As we watched it through that week, the Euro kept it always off the coast, but the GFS at one time, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, it was maybe close to Myrtle Beach, maybe just to your north. I mean, we know we're going to get a lot of rain, but the question is, are we going to have a landfall and tropical system as well? Talk to us a little bit about that, especially you, Jamie, because if I'm not mistaken, it was headed right towards Myrtle Beach, Wilmington area.
Yeah, that
at one point.
That sort of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was definitely sort of the touch and go, and at least initially that week, our focus obviously was on Joaquin. You know, the sort of typical song and dance that we sort of have to do in this business. You know, is it not? Could it do this? It could do this, and we sort of danced that dance. All the while we sort of kept waiting. We knew something was going to happen, whether the GFS was going to cave to the Euro or the Euro was going to cave to the GFS. We knew it was coming. Thankfully, it ended up the way it did, and Joaquin stayed offshore. Certainly a good thing considering what we still ended up with. But we still have viewers, who will come up to me and they still refer to the flooding as Joaquin. I fought with producers and people here because they were how you guys know news stations, they're wanting to do special opens and Hurricane Joaquin coverage. No, let's drop the name. Do not mention Joaquin at all. It was, that's still a battle we're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
That brings me this question: what has that battle been like? Because national media is all over Joaquin, and evidently you guys locally with your stations. I mean, and especially the public, even they may not be as weather savvy, but they see a big hurricane, they see a lot of rain, or like, man, this thing's coming our way. So what's that battle been like for you, Rob? I mean, Jamie's told us a little bit, but what about the Charleston area?
Yeah, kind of the same. I think Jamie and I are probably in the same boat because, the models, people were, we kind of get close to Myrtle Beach and they get close to us. We share Georgetown County, so I think we also were keeping an eye on the models and where we're going to have a landfall, where we not. If we did have a landfall, was it going to come before or after all this other stuff was going on? So yeah, and we fight the battle. I agree 100%. Everybody wants to jump on the Joaquin bandwagon when, like I mentioned earlier, if you take Joaquin out of the equation, we were still going to have an event. And Shea mentioned, and I should have mentioned this as well, we've had a tremendous fall with flooding just on the normal high tide cycle. I don't know what's going on, but our typically Charleston floods at about 7 feet, and our tides have been running 1.5 feet above normal just about every time we have a full or a new moon. So we get a lot more flooding, and that's with no rainfall whatsoever. That's no Joaquin. That's nothing. So we've got an inherent problem here in Charleston. Either we're sinking or the tides are getting higher. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's one question I was wanting to ask you guys. Some of your flooding, especially in Charleston, and I believe, Jamie, up in your area, because I've seen Andy out in the field, especially in the Surfside area, a lot of coastal and tidal flooding as well during the event, maybe even afterwards.
Yeah, the week leading up to the flood, we had the astronomical high tides. Those alone were the highest that I had seen in my 8 years living here. I'd never seen the tides that high. Repeatedly that high. It was every single high tide that week. Garden City and Cherry Grove and Surfside Beach were flooding every single high tide. The highest of those high tides, unfortunately, came on the Sunday of the flood. when we had, at least here in Myrtle Beach, that's when the very heaviest of the rain was coming down. So we had this tremendous amount of water trying to get into the ocean. We had incredibly high tide, and I think that's kind of a lost story, at least here. Certainly don't want to downplay Charleston, but and the sort of the coastal flooding and erosion issues there, but we're not used to that here. We rarely get significant beach erosion. We rarely get significant coastal flooding, just because of the shape of, Winyah Bay up here. We're sort of tucked away and protected. Our beaches are battered. They're just absolutely ruined. I mean, there's places you can walk today right in the middle of Myrtle Beach, and you still have a 5 or 6 foot drop off of sand that we lost over the course of that week, and it all sort of culminated on that Sunday when we had the high tide and the floodwaters all at the same time, and heading into a El Nino potentially stormy winter followed by hurricane season. Our beaches are bad, and tons and tons and tons of locals here that I've talked to say our beaches are worse, or as the worst they've seen it since Hurricane Hugo.
One thing before we kind of leave Joaquin, and Shea, I want to talk to you a little bit about this because you do some tropical stuff, is that was a fairly strong hurricane. If I'm not mistaken, 939 millibars. Winds were somewhere around 150. Something that it really intensified in a short amount of time, and the effects it had on the Bahamas. Can you talk to us a little bit about that before we kind of transition into the heavy rainfall for the coast and the Midlands of South Carolina?
Sure, right. Yeah, it tended to move over a warmer pocket of sea surface water down that area. The sea surface temperatures are about 86 to 87 degrees in the area where it went over. So there's a fueling mechanism from the surface. Your winds aloft, the upper level shear had relaxed as well, so it really moved into a very favorable environment for rapid development. That anytime you don't have any mid-level or upper level shear to tear the cloud tops off, or it allows for vertical stacking for these storms, and then you get a surface core to mid-level to an upper core all lined over the top of each other over that warmer water, and that's what allows for the rapid intensification. So it really, the Bahamas were just steaming hot that time of the year, and they tend to stay warmer until probably late October into November, when the water temperatures cool down into the upper 70s or near 80. So you had a lot of favorable conditions for rapid development for a storm. I think it did achieve a Category 4.
Yeah, I saw that Joaquin made it up to a Category 4. But like you're saying, with those really high sea surface temperatures that were down in the Bahamas, those extended up not as high, but definitely higher than normal, all the way up to the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, where that upper level low eventually went over, and you got that good vertical stacking. Like I talked about it in my tropical class at school, and just made a note, and a couple other people made the same note, that the setup for the upper level low that brought all the rain to South Carolina was very tropical, but it had no tropical circulation to it. So like you had 20, 30 inches of rain, which you get in a hurricane like Joaquin, but it was only one straight fire hose system.
Right, yeah. Well, you also got to remember you have the Gulf Stream out there too, so you have your thermohaline current that it's going from south to north, so you have moisture traveling along that, and then you get the hurricane over that, an upper level low with your upper cooler pool of air, and then you also had Invest 99. That was a sneaky one that got down in between both of them. I don't think many people picked it up. I kind of caught it on a snapshot or two. And that sort of added to it all as well, a little bit of a vorticity at the surface, driving right down the coast of Florida. It almost went unnoticed. It was there for a couple of hours. So there was a lot of moisture feeds going on in that area. You had upper level, mid-level, and low-level moisture feed all at one time. And then you had high pressure out over the Atlantic as a driving force for an east-southeasterly gradient to push that cold front. Don't forget about the cold front that moved over us and then got backed into the coast. So you had a lot of moisture already there, plus the upper level low drawing from the Gulf or the Caribbean. And so you had 3 different sources of ammunition going on for this system to fire off.
Yeah, there were a lot of different factors that, like you brought up the cold front. I had completely forgotten about that one. Rob, maybe you can chime in on this. Like,
Okay.
How many of these factors would you convey to the public, like, in saying, like, okay, yeah, there is Hurricane Joaquin down here, but we've also got these three other things going on? How much of that did you convey?
Well, I think we did it all, because I think what we were trying to dispel, as Jamie mentioned earlier, that this was solely Joaquin, and you take the Joaquin out, and you still have a pretty wet scenario setting up with the upper level low, that stationary front that eventually landed on us and sat there for a while, and again the blocking high that wasn't letting anything moving anyway, and Joaquin coming out of the Bahamas was slow getting out of there, and it just kept the moisture feed going. So I think we, on TV, I think we conveyed to our audience that this was a multiple kind of reasoning rain event. It wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just a cold front coming through or a stalled front. There was a lot more going into it. And I think we needed to do that to help us get the message across that this was not the hurricane itself, by itself, that was causing all this rain.
Well, this brings me, we were supposed to have Rob Morales on from National Weather Service there in Charleston. As we transition into the heavy rain event, what was the communication like? Because, Rob, you're in a different weather forecast area than Jamie and then Henry as well, so you guys are dealing with 3 different forecast offices. I know up here where we live, Kent and I, in the Western Carolinas, they even, as far north as we are, we're saying, devastating, life-threatening flooding could happen, towards the weekend. What was the National Weather Service? What was the communication like with you guys? And what were they trying to convey in their messages to you guys to pass along? Because I know up here, when you put potential devastating flooding, that captures everyone's attention. I mean, we had emergency management from several counties doing meetings and having protocols and having officers go out and fire departments go out to people who live on rivers and having them to voluntarily evacuate where they don't get affected by flooding. Thankfully here we didn't get that much. We had 4 or 5 inches and some minor flooding, nothing like you guys. But what was the National Weather Service's part in this? How are you guys communicating since you're in 3 different offices and had 3 different aspects, I would say, from those guys?
Well, I think starting in Charleston, the NWS chat is our direct line to them. They're constantly feeding information. The verbiage was very strong. I can't remember, Shea, maybe you can remember, I should know the verbiage. That the one I'd never seen was that got into the rescue, but basically an emergency that they issued that I'd never seen them issue before. A flood emergency.
Is what it was,
yeah. And I'd never seen that, but basically it was for water rescues. They needed help getting people out. But I think the verbiage was pretty strong, and I think we picked up on it, and they picked up on it, and they were right there along with us. And as you guys know, this is a partnership. TV stations get calls from viewers who relay specific weather information to us that we, in turn, relay to the National Weather Service, and vice versa. They get information that they relay to us. So for us on TV, it gave us the confidence to go on TV and say, folks, this might be epic, and this is something that this isn't just any normal rainstorm. This is one that could go down in the history books.
I have absolutely nothing but brilliant things to say about Wilmington. I'm fortunate enough, this TV market is covered strictly by the Wilmington Weather Service. They started conference calls that Wednesday. We were doing conference calls with them Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and then it was twice daily all the way through the weekend, even as the event was winding down and we were transitioning into river flooding, still doing conference calls. They were absolutely amazing. I'll never forget the Friday flood watch put out by the Wilmington office. I sort of called it our version of Katrina. It was sort of one of the strongest worded flood watches I'd ever seen, and included catastrophic flooding, potentially life-threatening, dam failures, road failures, and I sort of took 2 or 3 of the most important lines of that flood watch, and that's what I led my 6 o'clock news with that Friday was, look, you may not want to listen to your local weather guy, you may not believe me, but, listen to these guys, listen to what the Weather Service is saying. We're all in this together, and that was sort of my way of relaying the severity of it and sort of, getting the point across that, yeah, this is more than just a nuisance type of flood event, which we're kind of used to around here. But, yeah, this is going to be something bigger than most of us have ever seen.
And I think the Columbia office, our office, given the staff they have, because we've had our Mick, our Sue, warning corner. I mean, a number of people have retired in the last year, so I know they're down bodies. But with chat and everything, they did a really good job communicating that we were about to see significant rain totals. I think where we had a little bit of a gap in that being in Columbia and some of the confusion began was with the timing, because Columbia had so many different press conferences and releases going on, and which was, I think, odd. It seemed like our Weather Service office was helping out with some of the folks with emergency management, that I would at times see some conflicting information from what the Wilmington office would say and the Charleston office. I think the offices themselves did good, but I think what Columbia experienced that was a little bit different with communication was, given that EMD's there, given that we had all these other command posts setting up there, it was trying to make sure that we could communicate, here's the accurate information for us, here's what we're talking about for the coast, whether it be Charleston, whether it be Myrtle Beach, and here's the time frame, the potential time frames that we're looking at. So the Columbia office, again, being down some bodies, I think they were definitely fantastic job as well, and given that it seemed like had a number of other folks coming to them because the office was just conveniently right there, or having to go over to EMD to help out with some stuff, I can't say enough good about them as well.
Well, let's kind of talk about now the storms coming into the area, and Rob, Jamie, and Henry, and Shea, I would like for you to kind of maybe break down your area. What all kinds of facets did you see? Maybe some of the highest totals in your forecast areas, and some of the personal stories that I know it's still fresh in everyone's mind, but what were some of the things that kind of stuck out to you? And Rob, I'll start with you first.
I think the fact that it just never stopped. We thought we would get a break. And then I think you guys were talking about the axis of heavy moisture kind of transferring north and south, and we were in it most of the time. Sometimes we were on the lighter edge, sometimes the heavier edge, but it just never stopped. And I pulled down October. Going back to September, we had a ½ inch, but first we had 1.37 inches. The second, we had 1.61. Our greatest one-day rainfall total, 11.5 inches on the third, 2.81 inches on the fourth. So each and every day you're talking about tremendous amounts of rain, and the ditches here. Charleston, like many cities, is growing like crazy, so there's construction everywhere. We've lost our natural buffer to get rid of some of this water. You've got asphalt all over the place. The ditches don't clean out properly because we're an antiquated city and we need more infrastructure. So these ditches, which filled up one day, just kept filling up and overflowing. So I think it just, for me personally, you keep asking, okay, when is it going to stop? And it just never did. And we had what kind of, not really infuriated me, but I live very close to, if you guys have been to Charleston and Mount Pleasant, there's a place called Boone Hall Plantation, which is a wonderful plantation. A lot of people visit, and it's a big tourist area. But and Shea, you know this, there's a weather station, about 3 miles northeast of Boone Hall that reported 26, 27 inches, and that's what the national media grabbed a hold of, and thinking everybody in the area got 3 feet or 2.5 feet of rain, whatever it might be. And that wasn't the case, but the rainfall totals were substantial. There's no doubt about it. Many areas did pick up 2 feet. My daughter teaches second grade in Somerville, and about half of her class, the students and families, were evacuated from their homes. And they were out of school for, I believe, 6 days, which I think was one of the longest stretches of kids out of school in Dorchester District 2. So it was something that hope we don't have to see again. Not in my lifetime, hopefully.
And Jamie, let's go up to you guys, because like you said, North Myrtle Beach got 15 inches in one period, and then you guys got it all over again towards the last part of the weekend. So.
Yeah, it did stop for us on Saturday. Saturday was a completely dry day. The sun came out for a little bit on Saturday. Thankfully, we had sort of conveyed that it was going to come in 2 waves. We didn't think the first wave would be as impressive as it was. Convection just anchored over northern Horry County, North Myrtle Beach, like I said, Longs, Cherry Grove, Calabash, right there on the border. Just Friday night picked up 10 to 15 inches of rain. We had dam failures up there Friday night. Our crews were trying to get up there to cover it. They couldn't get there because the roads were closed. Then we had sort of a break during Saturday. But like Rob was mentioning, by the time the main axis came through, every retention pond, which if you've ever been to Charleston or anywhere along the coast, you know that we're just nothing but retention ponds. Every mall parking lot, grocery store parking lot, subdivision, and neighborhood has retention ponds. Well, by the time that fire hose came back, they were full. And I think the speed at which the flooding developed and got out of control was unbelievable. And I think that owes to kind of what we were talking about earlier, sort of all of those factors coming together and just the incredible volume of tropical moisture that was involved. The efficiency of that rainfall was insane. By the time that band worked its way through the Grand Strand, it had sort of contracted a bit. It was a fairly narrow band. The really heavy rain on Sunday in Myrtle Beach only fell for about 6 hours. But in that 6 hours, it was just insanity. And flooding in places that had never flooded before. One of the things that stood out to me, around here, like you guys down in Charleston we get flooding from a thunderstorm, and our water doesn't move. It just kind of piles up and sits there and doesn't go anywhere. We had raging rivers here because there was so much water. Bridges were washed out. Bridge overpasses. Landslides. Things that you would never think of in such a flat place. That was kind of very eye-opening for me. Sitting here at the station with our back parking lot flooding and all of us having to move our cars at the last minute. Things like that. So it's incredibly memorable event.
And then Henry, you guys had heavy rain, but like you said, a lot of your flooding and devastation came from levees and dams that failed. So kind of talk to us a little bit. And I'm not sure your viewing area. I know I have family that lives in the Sumter area, and they saw pretty high totals in that area. So kind of talk to us about the totals you guys picked up, and then the devastation there from rain and from the dam failures.
Yeah, Friday night and into Saturday, we kind of had that light drizzle and mist rain, and that goes back to, again, trying to make sure everybody understood what was going on. Many people expecting this to hit on Saturday, and of course, at that point when it's not happening for us, we're seeing it flooding pictures out of Myrtle Beach, starting to get some flooding in Charleston. It's like, it's blown out of proportion here, and when you started to see that upper level low push a little bit more along with that surface low, and you also had Joaquin, which that's still a problem for us too. Everybody's saying Joaquin, this is from the storm. It's like, well, no, you had 3 fire hoses that just happened to come together right over Columbia. About 5:30, the downpours just became absurd, about anywhere from 1.5 inches, 2 inches an hour. These are the rain rates we're seeing. And by the time that 8 o'clock rolled around, you're looking at porta-johns floating down major roads. And, a little bit of this, for me and from my standpoint, and I know our staff, is that how is this happening? What in the world is going on? I understand the rain totals we're seeing. We have a great tool, I believe you have it in Charleston, Rob, WeatherBug. So we're able to monitor some of these weather totals as the rain is falling, and as you're seeing these totals climb, it's like, okay, we should be getting flooding, but how are we getting these roads to completely just wash out? We're talking feet of water on it. And it turns out that we're then getting reports of these dams that are failing. And, you hear a dam failure, and that's very alarming. And then you're finding out that, for example, the Gills Creek that we have, that gauge hadn't had a proper reading by the time that it was discovered that dam, that Lake Catherine Dam had failed, and it's flooding into that in about an hour and a half. The gauge had washed away. So it was trying to regain your composure and realize, okay, we've got a bigger problem than these rain totals. We've got flooding. Where are the dam failures? What dams are in jeopardy of failing? And unfortunately, in some cases, you may have to cry wolf 1 or 2 times because you get reports of these other dams that are failing, and just letting people know that, hey, look, the rain's not going to stop, the water levels are not going to go down anytime soon. We're not talking about a flooding event because of rain. We're talking about these dams are failing, so these lakes that you would normally maybe go fish in or take a canoe or something out in, these are pouring into your neighborhoods right now. And, just thinking back on it is very, very surreal. Again, you're seeing a business, there's a Tidal Max business over on an eastern part of town near the Gills Creek that I remember looking at it live on air as we were showing a picture of the water filling into this intersection. I had our reporter out there go back to the building to shoot it again because I could see that the building, it just didn't look right. And when she did, I realized there was structural failure to the building. The building was partially collapsed. And there was about 7 feet of water in that one particular intersection. So it kind of became at the point of, you can't wait this out. We're not talking about flooding waters. We're talking about very dangerous currents. And to quote another one of the storm chasers we had in town, Katrina-esque flooding with the currents that we had and the pace that they were moving at. So it really just kind of became a sense of alarm to let people know you need to get your stuff and you need to get to higher grounds, and if you're within this radius of an area that's flooding, it's time to go if you haven't gone already. So it's really something I've just never seen before. I've seen flooding, but dam failures like this, never seen it. And it was still kind of shocked to think about what we were having to tell people is that these dams are failing, these lakes are emptying out.
Yeah. And one thing you started out, like I've got a friend who is in Columbia, he lives there, and he ended up showing us a lot of videos of people on the roads where they were washed out. But one thing you said earlier on was the 3 fire hoses that came through, and how it wasn't Joaquin, it was the 3 fire hoses. And Shea, I'll bring you in on this, but talk about how, what this term of the fire hose actually is and what it was that set it up for this whole event.
I think you have the three factors: the upper level low, you have the spread from Joaquin, the upstream spread, and then you have your east-southeast gradient coupled with that cold front. That actually became a warm front backed into the coastline. So three elements creating a stream, an atmospheric river right across the middle of the state. As time went on in the upper level low moved to the north, that boundary laid east to west and traveled to the north up into North Carolina. So that was, I think, the second wave that hit Myrtle Beach. But it was super impressive to see, and I can show you a graphic if you let me grab the screen.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let me see. Share screen. All right, can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just scrolling down through a blog I did over the whole area. Here's some of the 3 elements right here on this map, where you have this upper low, you have another surface low down here across Florida, Joaquin, east-southeast winds pushing, northeast winds driving down from the north. That was another element in and of itself that started some of that coastal flooding, with some strong northeasterly winds right behind the front, and as the front moved back, the gradient between Joaquin and this high pressure pushed everything back into the coastline, coupling with the upper low just to the west. So, really it was just a recipe for an atmospheric river to just dump rain. I really commend the WPC NOAA outputs for their modeling, because they got onto it. They brought those double-digit numbers down and held it there for about 48 hours. I think that's when I realized, man, we're going to have a really serious event coming. Here's a couple of little snapshots just of some of the stream upstream, and then I'm going to here's some winds. These are winds for the day. We were at 30 to 35 mile an hour winds. I mean, we were gusting to 47 to 50 throughout the day, so you can understand how a driving force for the high tide would be. That added another 2.5 feet of water into our area. Folly Beach Pier, we went over about 52 or 53 miles an hour for the day. This is our coastal mesonet. These yellow arrows are our weather flow coastal mesonet. We have a hurricane station over here. So we were able to capture the winds and figure out where the front is according to what these stations are reading. Where's the front at this point? Did it back inland? Is it still offshore? And that is very valuable information because you can see what's going on right along the coastline. It was that close of an issue where just east of the boundary you had these very strong winds coming in from the east to southeast, and then right behind it as it moved back out from the north. The upper jets, we were showing 70, 90 knots coming down from the north and back up from the south, so you had a really healthy upper level. That's the 300 millibar map. You had a really healthy upper level system coming together, and I'll get right to the loops now. Let me see here. Here's the fire hose you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The development of that to me is still just so fascinating, just to watch how it's insane.
Right. You know, earlier on in the models actually played around with this entire episode. The GFS and especially the Canadians sort of had a Fujiwara effect with Ida and Joaquin and that upper low all sort of doing a slingshot effect, and you know, I kind of joked around a triple Fujiwara effect. Because it would be so rare to see one, but it was certainly entertaining to think of the idea of that to happen. But here's a mosaic loop. This is pretty popular loop from the College of DuPage. This shows you can see where it goes from daytime to the nocturnal at night, and then it just turns on, and just like Rob said, relentless. And Rob, yeah, I think you were right. That Cocoa Rise observation in Park West read about 26.22, but I think the average was right around 17 to 21 overall.
Yeah, that seemed to be it. Yeah.
Here's another. Let's see if we can get this one to play here. Yeah, this is a pretty good loop. Gives you 10-minute increments. And here comes the front right here. It was offshore. Now it's backing into the coast again. Now it's back fully into the coast, and now the rain train starts.
Watch it anchor there right on top of CRE on Friday night.
Right
there. There goes just.
And then it gets backed into the coast again and just turns on.
And you can see lots of embedded pockets of convection, which is probably what brought a lot of that really heavy rain rates to inland areas like Columbia.
That's right. It was tough. Very
unreal
tough
to look at. It really is. I mean, you know, you look at this, it's like this can't be real. It's, you know, this same path for a good 24 hours just getting nailed.
And then it still didn't end. You still had streams of rain moving in even after your main batch. So you had that northeasterly effect behind it. As Joaquin made its way off to the northeast, that high pressure moved down and created that northeast gradient all over again. So you had even more flooding there. You know, it's one of those, like Rob said, just relentless. It just never ended, and it was tough on the forecast because I've got people calling me up and they're texting, they're saying, hey, you know, we're trying to look for a window of opportunity to go kiteboarding, or you know, when is it going to clear out? And I'm just telling them, you better buckle down, because it's not just about this rain and wind, it's about thunderstorms. I mean, heavy cells in those thunderstorms. And we're also looking for water spouts and tornadoes. You know, anything can be embedded in that. So, you know, you can just see the swaths of rain and you know, Columbia. I remember seeing some of the videos in Columbia, and I knew, wow, man, you know, Columbia's getting ransacked. I think our highest wind speed was, let's see, Sunday, 54 miles an hour at 3:16 a.m. on October the 4th. We had a wind spike. That's just from some of these storms. I mean, you can see all the spikes going on. These are convective cells moving into the area one at a time. And, you know, you're looking out on a radar and you're telling, okay, here comes the next one. You're like, oh, yeah, look out, Ondaw, here comes the next one. Here we got a wind spike of 60 miles an hour on October the 3rd, Saturday. That was at 8:18 p.m. I remember that storm pretty well. That was one that National Weather Service kind of went off on. And it was, you know, those straight line winds that come along with those cells and that east-southeasterly gradient built in. It was so impressive. There's nothing like it.
Well, then we have all this heavy rain, and then afterwards the effects, a lot of river flooding. And I lived in Myrtle Beach for a couple of summers, and I have the INWS still for Myrtle Beach coming to my phone, and I still think up until a couple weeks ago I was still getting river flood warnings for parts of Horry County. So let's kind of talk about that as we reach the 9 o'clock hour. After the heavy rain moved out, we still had a lot of river flooding, especially I know in your forecast area, Jamie, but I'm not sure about the other areas. But can we talk a little bit about that and the effects? A couple of weeks after the storm, we still see flooding.
Yeah, absolutely. It just sort of kept going and going. The river forecast, we obviously knew that was sort of the second thing in the back of our minds sort of leading up into that weekend was, okay, if this forecast verifies in the upstate and in, Columbia, then yeah, we know we're going to be getting river flooding. The initial forecast for the rivers were nothing close to what happened with reality. The Waccamaw River in Conway, which is about 15 miles west of here, was the third highest crest on record. It beat the 1999 Floyd crest, just shy of the Floyd crest from 1999, which is sort of the benchmark storm around here for rainfall. The Black Creek in Florence, all-time highest crest. The Black River in Williamsburg County, all-time highest crest. And all of this, came, we had the flood over the weekend. All of this didn't happen until Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, a full week later, and we're still dealing with flooding. And the Waccamaw River, even today, right now, is still just above flood stage. That's an incredibly slow-moving river, and it was in major flood stage. It peaked on Wednesday after the rain over the weekend, and it remained in major flood stage through the following weekend into about Tuesday of the following week. So you had hundreds and hundreds of people there along the riverbank, that were completely out of their homes, and there's still streets down there by the river that are flooded because the river just is so incredibly slow to drop.
Mm-hmm.
Rob and Henry, I mean, river flooding for you guys well after the event. What was it like?
It's still up in Columbia. You've got a few areas that are still running hot, but I'll tell you, the river flooding was a problem in Columbia with both the Broad River, the Saluda River, and the Congaree moving through, because we've got a lot of bridges too that kind of connect, all of Columbia going into downtown. So with the flooding and all the water coming downstream, it created some structural concerns with some of these bridges. We had a lot of bridges being closed. You had areas that are prone to flooding, and of course, typically you see that water receding fast, but it was just not the case. We had it in one instance, the Old Mill area in the Old Mill Creek. I saw it on, I want to say it was last Wednesday. I was out there for the first time. And the way that between that dam failing and rushing into that river, it completely rerouted the river. The river is a good probably 30 feet from where it used to flow. Where it used to flow, the actual bed is dry, and it's going under a completely new path that it made. So that, of course, caused some homes and some businesses to flood, and unfortunately they remain flooded because they are now in what's a riverbed. So we still have some areas because of the roads that have washed out next to these rivers, and some of the areas still running a little bit higher. We're talking 5-10 feet above major flood stage in some of these locations. That they are, you'll get the alert every now and then that, like Corley Mill Road, for example, which is near the Saluda River, closed due to high river levels right now, and it's more precautionary because it's just so unsafe as a whole right now that there's concern of a number of things happening. So the flooding and what it did with these riverbeds, it's getting a little bit easier, but it's still at times a little bit of a problem because of just the three rivers running through and so many bridges in Columbia.
I guess here in Charleston, we kind of focused our news attention up into the Waccamaw and the Black River as well, because some of the pictures coming out of places like Andrews, South Carolina, and Georgetown County were just amazing. We have a situation here. They have the Ashley River, but there's really no good gauge up the river. It's really more in the harbor. So anybody living along the Ashley River, we were having a really tough time forecasting for them what exactly was going to happen, because we had no good data coming from upstream, at least running down the Ashley. We also have the Edisto River, and that floods traditionally, but Didn't see as much flooding there as obviously points to the north. Probably one good thing, and I don't know if they came around to the different offices, guys, but shortly after the flood, we had a survey team made up of USGS and National Weather Service folks who came by and interviewed us, our team of meteorologists, about what we liked, what we didn't like, what they did well, what they didn't do well. And one of the things we mentioned was there just wasn't enough good river gauges to give us a good understanding of what's coming down the pike. And they did say there are a couple of gauges that were already in the works that are going to be added to the mix, and then others that they're going to probably add to the mix because of what happened. So I don't know about you guys, but that was my first time really concentrating on what was happening for Henry and the upstate and what eventually could happen all the way down to the coast. I know in snowmelt areas that's a big deal, but here we just don't see it that often, that kind of astronomical flooding that is going to create our record cresting of our rivers and streams close by.
Well, that was actually something that was for us, because we had to let people know that even when the rain stops, all the rain in the upstate's got to come this way.
Yeah.
So not done with the flooding. And then for you guys, because you've got so many people that live in Columbia that have second homes, whether it be in Myrtle Beach or in Charleston, to say, hey, all these rivers have to go somewhere and eventually get into the Atlantic. So, it's letting people know that, okay, it's Tuesday right now, but come Friday and Saturday, the flooding we have here is now going to be a problem down there. So, it would definitely be the first time that I've ever been anywhere that you just show the chain reaction throughout a state in really 3-4 different coverage areas that will be impacted, but how it relates to really everyone at home.
We had the same Weather Service survey team. They were here about 2 weeks ago and brought the same thing up. One of the big problems we had here was, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the sort of topography in the rivers, but the Waccamaw River sort of curves its way through Horry County, heads out into the ocean, but it kind of runs into the Intracoastal Waterway. Well, that Sunday, with all the rainwater coming down and the flood water coming down, the high tides coming in, that water got into the waterway, and we had flooding along the Intracoastal Waterway that most people around here had never seen before, or if they had seen it, the last time it happened was Hugo. And for a good week and a half, there was no way for that water to get out of the Intracoastal Waterway because the Waccamaw was so backed up. So the water just sat there and sat there and sat there and would not go anywhere. And there's no gauges, at least I haven't found. Weather Service certainly didn't know about any on the waterway to keep up with water levels there. So that was something, hopefully some changes that come out of that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you could actually see that from the satellite passing over. You could see the dark plumes along the South Carolina coast of just all the water that was coming out of the central and the northern part of the state.
Our beautiful black water.
Yeah, we kind of joked about that as being Carolina sweet tea around our area. It was that brackish. I mean, you definitely could. I think National Weather Service Wilmington did one with the NASA Worldview, the EOD Worldview, and they did a great job of labeling it and showing Winyah Bay, which is a huge river deposit up there, and even Charleston and the harbor. And I looked at it for a couple more days on some clear skies, and was like, I was wowed by that. But then even going out on the water. At the kite border, you're out there and you're like, wow, I cannot believe this water, and it's probably not very healthy. They're telling people not to swim in it. So and that lasted for weeks. I mean, that was 2-3 weeks worth of that. So the long-term effects, and I think interstates were still closed upstate. Sections of I-95. Allendale, McClellanville areas here, some of these people were still trapped in their homes, or they just couldn't get to their homes, and it was pretty bad. The flooding it just sat. It just wouldn't go anywhere. And then we kept having a few more rain events here and there, and high tide anomalies, and more northeast wind events, and so we're still climbing out of it, I think.
And for us here in Charleston, we had a record October rainfall, and we followed that up with a record November. So I look back in the history books, I've never seen back-to-back months in the same year that now hold the wettest for that particular month. We've had different years, but never the same year. So we're kind of waterlogged down here.
We're pretty close to the annual record, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I don't know how much we got today, Shea. I'll have to double check, but we're about an inch behind what will be our record for wettest year ever on record.
And we still have a whole nother month.
Yeah, and we got rain today. I don't think we got enough to reach the record today, but yeah, like you said, we've got a whole rest of the month yet to come.
Jamie and Henry, I was going to ask you, are you guys pretty close to your wettest?
Yeah, we're way on up there. The official records for Myrtle Beach and North Myrtle Beach are really spotty with huge, like 25-year gaps, so we never know where we are. That's another thing that also came up from that survey, because I don't know if any of you guys noticed or have noticed on any of the radar loops, but apparently there's a grove of pine trees just by the Shalote radar site that's blocking the beam as it comes right down the beach. So we have a huge blockage here right on top of Myrtle Beach and about 15 miles offshore. So the radar estimated precipitation and everything is all sort of out of whack. So I begged and pleaded for them to please cut those trees down, because it's a bad place to have a beam blockage. But yeah, we're way on up there. We're obviously close.
Yeah, in Columbia, and again, having not seen really the numbers in about a week, we're probably still running, and this is not really factoring in what they got over the last few days, but about 15 and change above normal for the year, 15 inches and change above where we should be. So we're definitely on pace to see just by far one of the wettest years ever. And I'll tell you, to me, one of the most impressive things on a side note of this is, if you guys remember when the drought monitor came out that following Thursday, to see the state of South Carolina just basically go from moderate drought in some places to it was gone. I mean, you think about it, and the drought was the story for so long, and here we are talking about right now, can we please not get any rain just for a couple months so we can get everything fixed again, when it was a totally different story just 2 months ago.
And Henry, correct me if I'm wrong again, I believe you guys got another, was it 4 or 5 inches, maybe 5 or 6 days after that event? I mean, from another heavy rain event?
Yeah, that following weekend we had another front slide through, slow moving, and it over about 2 days gave us another good chunk of rain. And unfortunately, it was just anything we get now is adding insult to injury. The ground cannot take anymore. So I know it's a case down in the coast as well. But yeah, we got hit again that following. I think it was that Saturday, Sunday it hit as well.
Yeah, it was that Sunday. I think we were all just sort of, I know, like in the news business, I was kind of just still coming down off the incredible week that had been, and here comes that Sunday, and we pick up a quick 2, 3, 4 inches of rain, and it's just the pace at which the flooding developed, because everything was so saturated. Even here at the coast, where we're kind of used to getting the water out of here, I mean, everything was just full, and it was just road closures all over again that Sunday. And almost every event since then has kind of been an overperformer, and little problems are still creeping up left and right every time we get a rain.
Yeah, we still get just about any time you have a rain event coming, the advisories and watches and warnings come out, so it's still recovering.
And Rob and Shea, this for you guys. I know a couple of days before this event took place, you guys had an EF2 tornado that came through the Johns Island area. So, I mean, you had folks out there who were probably still trying to clean up from that, and then you have this mess that comes in.
Yeah, what's interesting is, the main neighborhood it hit, Scotty, Johns Island, if you're not familiar, when I got here 28 years ago, was really the country. But Charleston's growing out, and they're having to find places to move, and Johns Island, which used to be really serene and still is to a point, now you've got a lot more neighborhoods out there. So it really hit this neighborhood. These are 4,000 or 5,000 square foot homes pretty hard, and we went out there the next day, and blue tarps everywhere. So a lot of these roofs have been ripped off, and trees on the roofs, and big holes. So yeah, it was, I think people here are a little bit shell-shocked. And what's interesting is when you look at the hurricane season, it really wasn't for us. We were very lucky. But at the same time, I think people feel like they were hit by a hurricane not once, maybe 2 or 3 times, especially from the late summer on.
Yeah, that was, I remember looking at it on radar. I mean, that was a pretty defined tornado with debris signature and everything. So I know it was a devastating night. One of my, I guess, my last questions, I know Kit has one to follow up. It's kind of twofold. we see a lot of people, and I've seen it in Columbia. Obviously, it was on the Weather Channel, but we see people still driving through these flooded roadways. And the white truck, I believe, in Columbia is the one that sticks out in my mind. How do you think people now, as they've seen this devastation, do you think they take flooding more serious, especially in your areas that you guys forecast for? Because it's nothing for people to still drive through flooded roadways. We see it all the time, but now that you all have experienced this and you're seeing this maybe from a social standpoint, social science standpoint, do you think people take flooding a little bit more serious than what they did maybe before this event?
No, unfortunately, I don't, and I'll tell you why. I compare it to the same way when you have a tornado hit somewhere. Everybody calls and wants to cuss you out and just say horrible things to you when you have to break in for life-saving information on a tornado. And it's usually those people that were hit last time are the first ones to call because they forgot how they needed you. Well, I think it's the same with the flooding. We had people that, because it was an inconvenience, are moving these road barriers, driving around them. They're not putting them back, and then you've got people not familiar with the area, and there's power outages at night, driving thinking these roads are open, and they're going right off the road, or they're slamming on their brakes and stopping just in time before going off the road. So I honestly think that wore off within the first 48 hours, the seriousness of the flooding. And I think that was why we started to see these fatalities going up. We had something like, I want to say 17 or 19 fatalities, but only, I believe, 5 occurred during the event itself. And then the rest were people driving into past these barricades, or the barricades were moved, and driving off the road at night after the event was over into these holes and going into these rivers that have washed out roads. So, no, I honestly think that the flooding concern and turn around, don't drown is still just as ignored as it was pre-flood event.
Yeah, I agree with Henry. And here along the coast, we have an inherent problem anyway. We have water in our streets every time there's a high tide. So people, I think, get very frustrated. They've got to get from point A to point B, and they're going to drive through it. I was going downtown this past weekend, and we had a little water in the road, and there was a tourist, they had an Ohio tag or whatever in front of me, and they stopped in the middle of East Bay Street because there was some water. Now, I knew that water was not very deep because I've seen enough of it. But they were not going to go through that water. And I had to kind of chuckle a little bit because the people behind me were honking their horn, and these folks were just trying to navigate and decide what they wanted to do. They ended up going in the median, a grassy median around, and then finally got the rest of East Bay Street. But I could feel their pain, and I know they didn't want to drive through it. But yeah, and Shea on the retaliation.
And Jamie, what about you guys up there in your area?
Yeah, people may be a little more aware of it, while it's still kind of fresh, but same old song and dance. Next summer when we start getting the flooding, summer afternoon thunderstorms, they're going to be driving right through it again and stalling their cars and, complaining about it. It's not going to change. We can say it till we're blue in the face. That Friday night we were showing, when the event first started, we were showing live on the air a car with water up to the door handles, somebody backed out of a parking garage, and, we stayed on that shot, and don't do this, don't do this. They're still going to do it. The barricades, it's ridiculous. But at what point do we kind of have to say, what else can we do? I mean, it's, make your stupid decision.
As they always say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. So.
Right.
South Carolina Department
or lead them around it.
They had signs up for at least, I think, about 2 weeks after the event, and just statewide signs that said, please don't move the barriers, and just sort of a reminder out there. But yeah, ultimately people they'll do what they want to, and all we can do is just say, hey, here's what's coming, and brace yourselves and take precautions. And the rest is up to them.
And I was wondering for you guys, and then I'm going to give it to Kip so we can close out the show. I know we've run a little bit over 9 o'clock. But quickly, did you guys cover this maybe like a tornado warning? Were you on the wall a lot? Did you guys do a lot of break-ins, constant coverage? How did you guys handle it to get the information out?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know we were on air We did a few updates here and there Saturday, and of course treating the news that warning people that it's going to be a soggy weekend. But Sunday, yeah, I mean it was pretty much going on Sunday and not really going off until the days kind of run together. I think it was Wednesday when we started to scale back, when the sun finally began to shine again, and then we didn't want to look like we were doing the same thing, so we scaled back some, but then it became letting people know that it's great to have the sunshine out, but the danger is still there. The roads are still down, gone, power lines down, and of course that upstream flow from the river's got to come down through the area. So it was like a severe weather event for several days, and then it was just kind of gradually fading off. So yeah, I would say it'd be very much like a severe weather event or a tornado event.
Was rain, so we were kind of ramping up as we would some tropical system, and then we went wall to wall pretty much most of the day Saturday and tapered off on Sunday. I personally had a dilemma because my wife was going through surgery down at MUSC, and the surgery was scheduled for Monday morning. I was hoping and praying this would be done so I could actually go down and be with her during her surgery. Not if it hadn't been done, I was still going to go, but fortunately for me, I have a son who's a pharmacist, a daughter-in-law who's a nurse practitioner, and another daughter, and they all three were with her the whole time. But my dilemma then was trying to get to the hospital, and they really blocked off the hospital access except for those folks who had business at the hospital. So fortunately, by that time, the water receded a little bit. I was able to get there.
I think they shut down downtown several times. I mean, they just said nobody in, nobody out. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, here too. I mean, it was sort of a combination. Sort of reminded me of more like hurricane coverage, where we're sort of leading up to it all week long. We did some extended coverage on Friday night when the event first started. We did some. We were breaking in off and on throughout the day Saturday, and then of course Sunday for the main event. We were wall to wall for the majority of it. We weren't quite as bad as Columbia, so we didn't continue into Monday or Tuesday. But of course, it was still updates and constant, coverage all the way through the rest of that week.
Very good. Well, Kit, I will let you go ahead and finish this off here.
Well, I just wanted to make one comment, and we could probably do this on the next show we talk about this flooding event. But right around just the few weeks before all of this upper level low, Joaquin was everywhere in the media. There was, for the month or so before that, the Godzilla El Nino. So we could probably have a whole nother show dedicated to what impacts El Nino probably had on this total flow, and especially like how in the few weeks before the Joaquin and upper level low event came through, we had like the classic ridge blocking system all across the United States that didn't break until Joaquin came through. That was my comment, Scotty.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, guys, we appreciate you coming on. Sorry we kept you a little bit past 9, but great stories and just good information to pass along. And I know it's going to be something that we talk about for years to come on, because, like you guys said, the situation is still evolving. I mean, roads are still closed, and new inlands and outlets of rivers and streams and creeks are being formed. So definitely appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us a little bit about it tonight. If you want, I'll toss it over to Henry first. If you want to kind of give out your Twitter or Facebook, how our followers can get a hold of you, and we'd love them to interact with you. And again, appreciate all of you coming on tonight.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, and of course Twitter and Facebook. It's at Henry Rothernburg, HenryRothhenberg, not B-U-R-G, but B-E-R-G. So I've got it the same for Twitter, for Facebook, even for Instagram, and it's one of these things that we're going to be looking at this for years to come. We're a long way from recovery, and Even some of the construction, I do want to say this real quick, some of the construction being done, some of these roads being done, when you have to relay soil and basically relay earth and ground, it takes a little bit for that dirt to settle again. And some of these areas, they're just kind of pouring the dirt in and throwing some tar over the roads to get them open again. So I'll be curious in about, say, 6 months to a year, are we looking at major pothole scenarios in some of these roads shifting because the soil didn't get to settle before they started paving it? So it's definitely going to be with us for some time, but certainly appreciate you guys having me on tonight to talk about this.
Yeah, and Henry, kind of a shout out to you. You were able to present about this at the NWA conference a few months back, and I know that was pretty cool for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, it was a great experience. It was kind of a shocking experience because it was literally 2 weeks to the day of my presentation from being asked to when we presented, and it was kind of more on here's what happened, here are pictures from the event, and I'm honored that I've been asked to present in Norfolk next year, which will be a little bit more detailed and talking about all the dynamics that played into this and how this is basically one. It's kind of like when you're little, you get those puzzles, a 1,000-piece puzzle right here, expert level. I mean, looking at all the research of this stuff, I'm looking forward to presenting it because this was kind of that. If you had one piece of this puzzle missing, then everything changes. From the blocking high to the upper level low, the surface low, and just the frontal boundary. So it's something that I'm excited to present on next year, and I'm sure you guys are all happy it's over. We never want to do it again, but we're always fascinated to learn more and more about this event.
Definitely. And Ricky wanted me to give you his hello. He's sorry he wasn't able to be here tonight. I know you and him are pretty good buds.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
So,
real good guy.
Well, if we want to go back down the panel, Jamie, you can give out your Twitter, and then we'll go Rob and Shea.
Yeah, Twitter, really simple, at Jamie Arnold, WMBF. That's the easiest one. Facebook-wise, it's I mainly do WMBF First Alert weather for Facebook.
and
Yeah, mine is, let's see, at Rob Storm Team 2 is Twitter, and Rob Fowler Storm Team 2 on Facebook, and like me.
We really like you.
We really like me.
And Shea, we'll let you give your Twitter and Facebook and the Chucktown Wind Report.
Okay, Twitter is WeatherflowChas. That's WeatherflowChas, or at WeatherflowChas. For the Facebook group Chucktown Wind Report, it is www.facebook.com/group/Chucktown Wind Report, all one word. That'll get you into the locals. There's captains, there's pilots, there's you name it. Anyone who's interested in wind and weather, with the focus being on wind there, is part of that group. And I try to do those updates daily, if not every 2 days, and maybe some extended forecasts here and there. But we also have consumer apps that you can see our private mesonet all around the coast. We have about 500 stations, and those are Wind Alert, iKitesurf, iWindsurf. We also have Sail Flow and Fish Weather for the other water sportsmen as well. So those are the 5 apps and products. They're free to download on mobile apps and enjoy.
Yeah, and Shea does a good job. It's a very good page to follow. So if you haven't done it already, I recommend you do it. And I want to give props to Jamie. He kind of saved me today. He graciously came on at the last minute. So Jamie, I appreciate you coming on. And I know the last time we were supposed to have you on, you were sick. So I'm glad you're feeling better.
And thank you for having me back. And like I said, it was, only reason I did it was to take down Ed because he couldn't do it. No, I'm just kidding. glad to be here.
Oh, man. Well, guys, we appreciate it. I hope you all have a great Christmas if we don't speak to you before now. And we look forward to having you back on and hopefully not talking about something like this.
Yeah.
All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you. All right. And next week we have Marshall Shepard on the show, so make sure you check in with us. Marshall Shepard, host of the Weather Geeks on the Weather Channel. He's going to join us, kind of talk about the year in review and weather, so I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit next week as well. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week.